Ladies and gentlemen, MrCropper here with Yaron Brook from the Ayn Rand Institute and Eric Weinstein, one of my favorite new people on the scene. Having been chased away from the colleges by a violent mob, he finds himself a bizarre collectivist thinking leftist in the right. And everybody on the right likes him and wants to be his friend because he was chased away from the left with a big stick. But he's still a leftist. This guy's here is just a questioner.
I know this wasn't meant to be a debate, but I was hoping that you'd speak a little bit more about altruism.
Now, why was it not meant to be a debate? That upsets me right there, right? Probably because Eric wouldn't have come if he was asked to debate the objectivists. So for that reason, they decided maybe not to make it a debate. And why would bringing up altruism signify that we're about to take it towards the direction of a debate? Well, because objectivists believe altruism is unmitigated evil, and everybody else believes altruism is unmitigated good. So we are on utterly opposite ends of the universe. So bringing this up is like throwing powdered aluminum into water.
Yaron has very famously, taken the Ayn Rand position that altruism is evil. Eric, I'm a little confused, though, about your position. I know you are a Bernie supporter, but you're also in the business world. Can you talk a little bit about your views on altruism and what we are to do with all those other people that you're just talking about?
Well, first of all, thanks for the question. Very short, so thank you. Sure. You don't get confused by things that people advertise as altruism. Altruism can be many things. One thing it can be is a peacock's tail. I'm so goddamn successful and so rich that I can afford to be altruistic, right? So you're actually being selfish in a weird way, but actually great things can be accomplished on behalf of that. You can also think about inclusive fitness from a Hamiltonian perspective. There are all sorts of ways to get to beautiful and decent acts that don't require mumbo-jumbo and nonsense. And
now, he's talking about altruism that is not self-sacrificial. He's talking about altruism that helps you.
What I think is you can have a child's relationship to altruism, or you can have an adult's relationship to altruism.
And there's his quasi-definition, which we can note is seated in an ad hominem attack. Anybody who he doesn't agree with your view of altruism, he's going to say you have a childish view of altruism. While people he agrees with will have an adult view of altruism. Now, he gave the example of the peacock with its tail as an example where that's altruism. How is that altruism? I do not see self-sacrifice in the peacock's tail. I don't even see a junky approximate of altruism in that. That's a really bad example of altruism, isn't it?
And what we need to get rid of is the child's relationship to altruism, because that leads to madness. So,
full stop, and he's done. Ad hominem, steps off, done.
Because this is, there's a lot to talk about here, but I'll just be brief. It's important to define terms what we mean by altruism, because it's used so widely and so briefly. But the philosopher coined the term, Augustine Comte, really meant living for the sake of other people, that your own happiness, your own sense, and that's
Why does Dave Rubin have white socks on? Okay, all right. Living for the sake of other people. That's what altruism means. Otherism. But Auguste Comte, being post-Kantian and living in France and being a Marxist knucklehead like he was coining a term for a way of ethics which he viewed as rational, reasonable, moral, but which we realize is the opposite of morality. Now, Auguste Comte wrongly identified certain types of action as moral action, took away the measurements of these actions, and identified the essence. He didn't realize he was using measurement omission, but everybody does who uses concepts. And when he found the essence of the actions he believed were moral, he found what they had in common was it was acting for other people and never for your own benefit. And so he termed it otherism. Now, objectivists have a concept for actions which do not benefit the person who's acting. We call them self-sacrifice or altruistic. Same thing. So it's the same idea, same word. Now, the only way to get around that is to ignore the whole situation and just make up some other kind of nonsense, like childish versus the adult view of altruism. Altruism means to act in favor of other people and not for yourself. Now, if at the end of the day you say when you act for other people and not for yourself, it ends up benefiting you, I'm afraid that Auguste Comte would come in and say, well, then you're just being selfish in a roundabout way. You're just pretending to help other people when actually you're making yourself better or richer or wiser or happier. So I don't think that you hit the essentials with that view of it there, Eric.
In many senses, it's still being used in that way, but in a disguised kind of way, because nobody actually wants to live that way, so it's being used as an excuse. I think one of Ayn Rand's real greatest achievements is rethinking ethics and really reconceptualizing what we mean by a lot of these terms, but reconceptualizing what ethics means. What's the purpose of morality, and what kind of values should be attained. So for her, a lot of kind of the peacock tail wouldn't be self-interest. So a lot of the kind of stuff we do because we're convinced that we're supposed to help other people, so we help other people to appease unearned guilt, I would say is not self-interest. You get rid of the guilt. That's the self-interest part, is get rid of what's unearned. So Rand really focuses us on our morality, says, rationally.
That was kind of an interesting point. How often do you do something in order to shirk off unearned things that have been piled on you? There's nothing wrong with tricking people around you who are piling unearned things on you, things that are none of your business, not your fault, nothing to do with you, but they're being stacked on your shoulders. And if you're dishonest and you lie in order to get out from underneath a stack of unearned things, that's perfectly moral on your part. Interesting thought.
Pursue your own self-interest. Figure out, using reason, what is truly in your long-term rational self-interest. Not easy. I always tell audiences to be selfish in a Randian sense, which I think is the only sense, is hard work. It requires real thinking. It requires real engagement with your life and with reality.
I wonder what Eric Weinstein's view of selfishness would be. If altruism comes in childish flavor and adult flavor, what about selfishness? Is it only in one flavor? I do wonder what he says.
Altruism, the idea of living for the sake of other people, is evil. Now the concept of...
Now that wasn't very convincing. Altruism, living for the sake of other people, is evil. Right? That wasn't very convincing. I'm convinced. I understand it. I know why. I just fear that it was not very convincing to Eric.
Is evil. Now that the concept of selfishness and self-interest does not preclude helping other people.
Now that is more interesting. In fact, that's what I would have dwelt on with old Eric there. I would have said, the funny thing is, altruists destroy themselves and other people, whereas selfish people help themselves and help other people. That's the funny thing about your idea here, Eric, is that whether it's an adult or a child version of altruism, it destroys cultures and nations. And selfishness builds cultures and nations. Now the reason for that is because in order to help myself, I have to do something productive in the world. And if I do something really, really productive, It's going to be able to help other people. So then I take my really, really productive thing or idea or action out in the world, help other people, and they pay me. So I end up being better off because I quote unquote helped other people. No, I did something that benefited them, and I was rewarded for it. And they benefit from me benefiting from them, benefiting from me. We all benefit back and forth when somebody's selfish. But when you're altruistic, you turn yourself into a pauper in order to help a pauper, and then you're both poor. And that doesn't help anybody at the end of the day. It doesn't help anybody. It's destruction.
And assisting other people in a variety of different interesting ways, right? But it has to be grounded in an idea of what it means to be me and what it means to be, to be successful and what my values really represent.
That last bit, what it means to be me, what it means to be successful, that last bit was pretty soft. Pretty soft, Yaron. Maybe true, but soft.
It has to be grounded in an idea of what it means to be me and what it means to be, to be successful and what my values really represent.
Yeah, I'm upset about what it means to be me, what it means to be successful, and what my values really are. Those were all just fluffy fluff. Not at all convincing to Eric. They didn't integrate and they didn't redound.
You put this philosophy to work in your novel Atlas Shrugged.
And now to the Atlas Shrugged, the Ayn Rand at the end of it, which is nice. I like to listen to those bits. Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I think we should have said or done with Eric. Not so much just sit there and mumble and try not to offend him. I think that's what sort of just happened there. But more to the point, I don't think objectivists have a good understanding of what altruism is. I don't think that we have a good tagline. I mean, at the end of the day, our view of altruism is something like bad actions, morally bad actions, right? Actions which supposedly are moral but which actually are bad. We don't have like a tagline understanding of it. Now, MrCropper's tagline understanding of altruism is that it is irrationality. That when you behave in an irrational way, you will behave in a way that is not separable from altruistic behavior. And there's really no difference between them. And that is why every culture in the history of mankind, has come up with some flavor of altruism as their cultural milieu. Because either you go with rational selfishness or you go with irrationality. Those are the only two paths. Now, the irrational path has many, many flavors. But rational selfishness pretty much only comes in one flavor. You have to leave the individual alone to do as he pleases. And the philosophical justification for why you should leave the individual alone to do as he pleases is so robust that it's difficult to come by. Therefore, most societies come up with some form of irrational answer. An anti-selfish, anti-reason answer to politics and ethics. And all irrational answers equate to altruism. All of them. You can tell that this is the case because altruistic behavior ends in disaster. Altruism leads to disaster. Look at Soviet Russia, look at Nazi Germany, look at fascist Italy, look at modern day Venezuela. Altruism leads to disaster because it is irrational. Rational selfishness is the opposite of altruism, and altruism is just a massive, massive collection of wrong answers. Every possible irrational wrong answer qualifies as altruism. Now, when you see somebody doing something insane, and you say, well, but they were motivated by altruism, and that's why they've ended up doing this insane thing. That had ought to give you a clue to what altruism really is. It's not benevolence. It's not making other people primary. Altruism is irrational self-destruction. There's nothing else about it. There's no other essential. When you take away the measurement, look at altruistic actions, and then take away the measurements. And what you're left with is irrational behavior, which is automatically self-destructive. As altruists, as objectivists, we know that irrational behavior is self-destructive. Altruism is irrational behavior. Altruism is self-destructive because it is irrational behavior. So the essence of altruism is irrationality. All right? Now, I don't know how that could have been communicated to Eric Weinstein on this stage here, but if anybody has his ear, please pass this word along to him. Altruism is irrationality.